Mheshimiwa Rais, karibu sana.
Mheshimiwa Musa Azan Zungu, Spika wa Bunge la Jumuiya ya Muungano wa Tanzania. Mheshimiwa Waziri Mkuu, waheshimiwa wa bunge hili la Jumuiya ya Muungano wa Tanzania, waheshimiwa viongozi, mabibi na mabwana, hamjambo. Asalamu alaikum. Wacha nianze hotuba yangu kwa kuwapatia historia ya Kiswahili. Nilipata kujua ama kuelezwa kwamba Kiswahili kilizaliwa kule Zanzibar. Ikakuwa na kubalehe huku Tanzania bara. Kufika Kenya ikapata matatizo ya maradhi. Kufika Uganda kwa sababu ya maradhi yalimzidi akafa. Na mazishi yalifanyika kule Kongo. Sababu hiyo nawaomba radhi. Nitoe hotuba yangu kwa Kiingereza. Asanteni. Najua nisije nikaharibu heshima ya lugha yetu ya Kiswahili. Let me begin by expressing my deepest gratitude to Her Excellency, my dear sister, Samia Suluhu Hassan, for her gracious invitation to undertake this historic state visit to your great and sisterly nation, the United Republic of Tanzania. From the moment of our arrival, we have been received with exceptional warmth and hospitality. I am equally honored to thank the Right Honorable Speaker, Musa Azan Zungu, and the distinguished members of this august House for the rare privilege of addressing this Parliament. I recall with great fondness Her Excellency's visit to Kenya in 2021, and I am honored today to reciprocate following her re-election as among the first heads of state to visit under her new term. Today, I stand here in reciprocity, not because we as Kenyans are your neighbors, not just your friends, nor even your partners. We are your brothers and sisters. I bring with me the warm greetings of the people and the government of the Republic of Kenya, as well as the goodwill of your fellow parliamentarians in our National Assembly and Senate. And in my company is both the leader of majority in Parliament, in the National Assembly, the leader of majority in the Senate, and the minority leader also in Senate accompanying me. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the conversation we are having today is significant and consequential, not only for our two countries, but for our region and our continent. At its core, it is about one central task: growing mutual trust to build shared strength. For far too long, relations among neighboring countries have been shaped by competition, suspicion, and rivalry, forces that have fragmented our markets, weakened our voice, and constrained our collective progress. And if we are to be honest with ourselves, ndugu majirani, some of these forces are still very alive with us. They still shape our narratives. They still influence our relations. Yet, our founding fathers, Mzee Julius, Mwalimu Julius Kabarage Nyerere, and Mzee Jomo Kenyatta, saw beyond this prism. They understood that Africa's future would not be secured in isolation, but in unity, and they planted the seed of regional integration because our destinies are intertwined, and our strength lies in moving forward together. For decades, Tanzania and Kenya have walked side by side, a partnership forged in struggle and anchored in shared purpose. At its foundation, two towering figures of our African history, Julius Nyerere and Jomo Kenyatta. Their partnership built on different but complementary visions inspired a model of unity that transcended borders. Even during the struggle for independence, including the Mau Mau period, Tanzania stood with Kenya, affirming a shared belief in freedom, dignity, and self-determination. That spirit gave birth to East African Community in 1967. Though disrupted in 1997, it was rebuilt through dialogue and statesmanship, leading to its re-establishment in 1999. Today, that community stands renewed and expanded, but its foundation remains the same: a growing partnership between our nations, defined not by the absence of challenges, but by our ability to overcome them and move forward together in pursuit of shared growth and shared strength. Waheshimiwa wabunge, kuna msemo unaosema unaweza kuchagua rafiki, jirani unapatiwa na Mungu. It is this enduring foundation of shared history, shared sacrifice, and shared purpose that finds expression in the ties that bind Tanzania and Kenya today. Waheshimiwa, we share a border that stretches nearly 800 kilometers from the Indian Ocean at Lungalunga and Horohoro, along Kilimanjaro, across the Masai Mara and Serengeti to Lake Victoria. That boundary is not merely a line on the map. It binds our destinies as a vibrant corridor of trade, culture, and human connection, where goods, ideas, and people flow, reminding us that our progress and our setbacks are intertwined. We share a language, Kiswahili, spoken by over 100 million people across East Africa, making it one of the most widely spoken African languages and a powerful unifying force across our borders. We share communities such as the Maasai and the Kuria, whose lives straddle our boundaries, families that intermarry, traders who cross daily, and entrepreneurs whose success depends on seamless movement of goods and services. And in my delegation, I have two governors from Narok and from Kajiado who have family across the border in Tanzania. But perhaps the most powerful illustration of our unity is found in nature itself. Each year, during the Great Wildebeest Migration, millions of animals move freely between the Serengeti and Masai Mara, guided not by borders, but by survival. They do not stop at borders, they simply cross and return. What nature has made seamless, policy must not make it difficult. Honorable members, it is not lost on me that we are engaged in this important conversation nearly 4 decades after the collapse of the East African community in 1997. We must reflect honestly on lessons we cannot afford to repeat. The collapse of the community in 1997 was not, at its core, a clash of ideologies. Whether capitalism in Kenya or ujamaa in Tanzania, each system sought to advance the welfare of the people. But governance, national or regional, is ultimately judged by its ability to deliver opportunity, equity, and prosperity. Where it does not, mistrust and division emerge. Our failure was not in building a shared economic vision that worked for all, and in retreating into narrow national interests instead of treating our shared resources, infrastructure, and markets as joint strategic assets for collective benefit by all our people. That was not their failure alone. It becomes our failure today if we repeat it. And so we must ask ourselves honestly, are we moving forward together, or are we risking becoming victims of the same limiting forces? Are we already repeating mistakes of the past? Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the time has come for our generation to move beyond incremental progress towards decisive integration. Because our biggest barrier is not infrastructure or policy. It is the quiet mistrust that pervades our relations. That suspicion has cost us time, opportunity, and prosperity, and we can no longer afford it. Tuko na maadui wengi, ndugu wa Tanzania, ndugu wa Kenya. Tuko na maadui wengi. Maadui wetu sio wa Kenya. Maadui wetu sio wa Tanzania. Maadui wetu ni ukosefu wa kazi na umaskini. Wacha nirudie, ndugu wa Tanzania, wa Kenya wenzangu, maadui wetu sio wa Tanzania ama wa Kenya. Maadui wetu ni kukosa ajira, umaskini na kukosa maendeleo. Kenya and Tanzania are deeply interdependent. Our bilateral trade reached approximately $860 million in 2025, and we are on course to hitting $1 billion this year, a reflection of growing opportunity. But this is only a fraction of what is possible. Investment cooperation stands as a central pillar of our bilateral relations. Kenyan enterprises have invested more than $1.7 billion in Tanzania, creating jobs, advancing skills transfer, and strengthening local capacity across key sectors, including manufacturing, energy, logistics, financial services, and agriculture. Makampuni za Kenya hapa Tanzania zimeegeza bilioni 1.7 ya Kimarekani humu Tanzania. At the same time, Tanzanian investments in Kenya, now valued at US dollars 336 million, are steadily expanding, driving employment, deepening cooperation linkages, and fostering shared growth. Makampuni za kutoka humu Tanzania wanaegeza kwetu Kenya. Kampuni ya Taifa Gas kwa mfano imeegeza kule Kenya. Kampuni ya Amsons wameegeza kule Kenya. Makampuni ya Lake Gas imeegeza kule Kenya. And these are companies that have invested in just the last 3 years. Miaka mitatu peke yake iliyopita. With recent strategic investments from Tanzanian investors in Kenya, I expect this value of investments to more than double by the end of this year. Na unajua wakati Rostam Aziz alinitembelea na akaniuliza kwamba angependa kujenga Taifa Gas, one of the largest tank farms in Africa, in Mombasa. And he had problems. Watu walikuwa wanamzungusha. Nikawaambia Wakenya wenzetu ya kwamba mwegezaji kutoka Tanzania ni mwenzetu. Anatuletea pesa, anatuletea uwegezaji. Tunachukua muda mrefu sana kutafuta wawegezaji. Lakini kasumba ambayo imekuwa pale nyuma ni kwamba mwegezaji lazima awe mzungu. Lazima awe mweupe. Lazima awe foreigner. Lakini mambo sivyo tena. Tuko na kampuni 500 za Kenya zinazoegeza humu Tanzania. Nimefungua milango kwa makampuni ya Tanzania wakuje waegeze Kenya. Joint ventures and SME partnerships, particularly in agro-processing, continue to flourish, underpinned by predictable policies, ongoing regulatory harmonization, and strong investor confidence. These capital flows reflect the growing role of the private sector as the true engine of regional integration. Wakati wakati kampuni ya Tanzania walikuja na wakanunua kampuni ya Bamburi Cement, kuna watu walilalamika kwangu, wakaniambia, mbona unaruhusu kampuni ya Tanzania kununua hii kampuni ya simiti hapa Kenya? Wale waliniuliza, niliwajibu nikawauliza pia, kampuni hii ilikuwa inamilikiwa na watu wa Ufaransa. Mbona hamkulalamika siku ile ilikuwa inamilikiwa na Wafaransa, leo inamilikiwa na Mtanzania, mnalalama? These cross-border investments are not merely flows of capital. They are powerful catalysts for expanding trade, the deepening interdependence of our manufacturing and agro-processing sectors in driving sustained demand for raw materials while spurring investment in value addition and integrated supply chains for export. With the right policy support, this momentum can significantly expand bilateral trade beyond current levels and position our two economies to capture a larger share of opportunities within the East African community and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Across the East African community, intra-regional trade stands at between 15 and 20%, meaning the vast majority of our trade still takes place outside our region. Yet, this is not a limitation. It is an opportunity. By expanding and trading more with each other, we create jobs, expand markets, strengthen industries, and build resilience across global shocks. At the heart of this opportunity are our young people. Across Kenya, Tanzania, and a wider region, millions of young men and women are entering the workforce each year with talent, ambition, and determination. What they seek is not charity, but opportunity. By deepening our integration, expanding trade, and investing in shared infrastructure, we are not only growing our economies, we are creating pathways to jobs, enterprise, and dignity for this generation of young people. In doing so, we are also addressing one of the most pressing challenges of our time, ensuring that the energy of our young people is harnessed for progress, stability, and shared prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, members of parliament, for this to happen, we must move beyond narrow national calculations and embrace a mindset of partnership where each country's progress reinforces the other's success. It must be grounded in physical connectivity, shared infrastructure, and deliberate investment that bring our economies closer together in practical and measurable ways. That is why the project we are advancing together are so consequential. The development of the road corridor from Malindi through to Lungalunga to Dar es Salaam is not merely a transport upgrade. It is a strategic artery of commerce, tourism, and people exchange along our Indian Ocean coastline. Similarly, the planned expansion of railway connectivity from Voi through Singida and onward towards Burundi represents a transformative step towards linking our hinterland markets, unlocking trade routes into the Great Lakes region, and positioning East Africa as a gateway between the Indian Ocean and the heart of our African continent. Let me also mention the 400 kV Kenya Tanzania power interconnector, spanning over 500 kilometers, has done more than connect two grids. It has synchronized our electricity systems, enabled power trade, improved reliability, and reduced vulnerability to supply shocks. And as we look ahead, the proposed Shinyanga, Mabuki, Kilgoris, Rongai interconnector will deepen this integration further. It will expand transmission capacity, strengthen the East African power pool, and allow us to optimize our diverse energy sources, Tanzania's gas, Kenya's geothermal and wind, and the region's broader renewable potential into a more reliable and competitive regional energy market. But infrastructure must also be owned in a way that creates confidence and shared responsibility. The recent decision by Uganda to acquire a stake in the Kenya Pipeline Company in Kenya is significant. In one act, it transformed its role from a user to a partner, turning the pipeline into a shared regional asset anchored in mutual benefit, energy security, and long-term confidence. In the same spirit, Kenya stands ready to invest as a strategic partner in the proposed oil refinery in Tanga. Asanteni. While I would have naturally, I would have preferred such a facility to be built in Mombasa, I fully recognize that Tanga is just less than 200 kilometers away, and in fact is part of the same economic space. Listen, wacha niwaeleze kidogo. Sisi ni partners wa East African Community. Na mawazo yangu ilikuwa ni kwamba we must use ile rasilimali tuko nayo hapa katika bara letu la East Africa. Lazima tusitumie kwa industrialization, ituzalishie nafasi za ajira, isuzalishie mali ama iongeze dhamana kwa yale mambo tulio nayo na itutafutie utajiri. Tayari nchi yetu jirani ya Uganda wamekwisha jenga pipeline, crude pipeline kutoka Hoima kule Uganda ikielekea Tanga. Itakuwa tayari kwa miezi chache zijazo. Wakati niliketi na Rais Museveni, nikamuuliza mzee, mbona tuchukue mafuta yetu tuende tuifanyie refinery sijui mahali gani, alafu tufuatilie tuende tununue mafuta ama oil products kwa bei ambayo ni ghali. Mbona sisi wenyewe tusijenge refinery hapa? Na Rais Museveni akanieleza kama nyinyi mko tayari, kwa sababu kama Uganda peke yetu ile refinery kuijenga itakuwa gharama ya juu na hatuna uwezo wa kujenga peke yetu. Kama Kenya na Tanzania wako tayari, tuungane, tunaweza kujenga ile refinery hapa kwetu. Mimi nikatumana technocrats wangu wakaenda wakakutana na Rais Museveni, tukakubaliana zile nambari, ikafanyiwa calculation, tukajua ya kwamba tukiungana nchi zetu tatu kujenga refinery hapa itakuwa ni jambo la muhimu, itatuletea ajira, sijui kama tunaelewana ba. Ndio sababu hiyo nikapendekeza ya kwamba tuwe na kongamano. Tukawa na kongamano hile kule Nairobi, tukawaita wale matajiri wetu wa bara letu la Afrika, kina Dangote na wengine ambao wameshajenga refinery wakati mmoja, na tukakubaliana ya kwamba nafasi tulio nayo is not to continue exporting raw materials from our continent and importing finished goods from elsewhere. Na ndio sababu hiyo tukapendekeza ya kwamba tukiungana Uganda, Tanzania na Kenya tunaweza kujenga refinery, ndio tuhakikishe ya kwamba ile mafuta tunairefine hapa kwetu, pesa inabaki hapa kwetu, nafasi za ajira inabaki hapa kwetu, tutengeneze bidhaa zingine ya fertilizer ama mbolea hapa kwetu, plastic industry iwe hapa kwetu, petrochemical industry iwe hapa kwetu, badala ya kuzitafuta kutoka nchi zingine, badala ya sisi kwenda kung'ang'ana kule sijui Strait of Hormuz kulete mafuta kutoka sijui wapi. Sasa nimesikia nyie mnamuuliza Mama Suluhu maswali magumu. Mbona yule bwana ameenda kutangaza refinery ya Tanga na kule na sisi wenyewe hatujatangaza? Sasa nauliza nyinyi, ile refinery bana is a big investment. Sikizeni, hiyo investment is in billions of dollars. Kama mimi ningekuwa na nafasi ningeipeleka kule Kenya, lakini kwa sababu ya kuamini ujirani na bara letu la Afrika na jumuiya ya East Africa, sisi ni wamoja, nikasema ikijengwa Tanga ni kama vile imejengwa Kenya. And why? And why are we building it in Tanga? It is because the crude pipeline is already heading to Tanga. Na mafuta pale tukimalizia itakuwa sehemu fupi sana kutoka Tanga mpaka Mombasa. Tupeleke mafuta alafu tuweke kwa ile pipeline ambayo tuko nayo tayari. It will make our Kenya pipeline commercially viable, better, and hatutakuwa tunasumbuka na sijui Hormuz na wapi kutoka hapa Tanga mpaka Mombasa. Sikizeni bana, kawaida kupata mwegezaji ambaye analeta mabilioni lazima uwapigie magoti, uwaambie maneno mazuri, wapatie sijui incentives, sijui wapatie nini. Mimi nawasaidia kuleta investment Tanga. Kama mungekuwa watu wangwana mungetulipa sisi wa Kenya. Mungesema asante sana. Kwa hivyo let us work as East Africans. What is good for Tanzania is good for Kenya. And what is good for Kenya is good for Tanzania. Tafadhali na wasihi, nikiwa rais wa pili, kwa mapenzi ya Mungu na kwa heshima yenu, kuhutubia bunge hili la watu the great people of Tanzania, I want to ask you, sisi ni wamoja bwana. We are one people. Tusikubali kasumba ya samani. Sijui Wakenya ni maadui wa hawa, sijui wa Tanzania. Hapana, we are one people. We have a common destiny. Nimewaeleza Wakenya sio maadui wa Tanzania. Watanzania sio maadui wa Kenya. Maadui wetu sote ni pale ambapo hatuna mali, hatuna nafasi za ajira, hatuna fedha. That is what we must struggle against. Na nataka niwaeleze, kuna semekana na uko kwetu kwamba mali unaweza kuwazima ama kugawa, lakini umaskini haugawanyiki bana. Yeah, let me put it in English. This said, you can share wealth, but you cannot share poverty. What matters is not whether the asset is in one side of the border or the other. What matters is whether it strengthens our shared prosperity. That is the model we must pursue. That is the model we must pursue. Shared corridors, shared energy systems, shared ownership, shared responsibility, and shared benefit. But infrastructure alone is not enough. Integration must also be supported by strong, credible, and effective institutions. That is why the decision taken at the 25th Ordinary Summit of the East African Community in Arusha were both timely and necessary. I have been to many meetings of EAC, but the one we had last was the most consequential in my estimation. First, we appointed Ambassador Stephen Patrick Mbundi, a Tanzanian national, as Secretary General. As he assumed office on 25th April 2026, Kenya reaffirms its full support for Mr. Mbundi. Second, we adopted a new financing model, 50% equal contribution and 50% assessed contribution, effective 1st July 2026. We also agreed to waive 50% of outstanding arrears on condition the balance is cleared within 2 years. Third, we agreed that quorum for all EAC organs shall be 2/3 of partner states, streamlining decision-making and making our union more effective. Fourth, all partner states must eliminate non-tariff barriers by 30th June 2026 without exception. And that is why my sister, President Samia Suluhu Hassan, and I yesterday instructed our officials, some of them in this room, that all the outstanding non-tariff barriers between Kenya and Tanzania, and there are about 20-something, we've told them by the end of this month, they must meet and clear all non-tariff barriers. We want to streamline. And ladies and gentlemen, honorable members, I must commend the leadership, the outstanding leadership of President Samia Suluhu on this meeting. Mnajua, asante sana. Mnajua pale 2024 biashara yetu ilikuwa imefika $950 million. Lakini mwaka wa 2025 ilirudi nyuma to 860. We lost almost $100 million of business between Tanzania and Kenya. Kwa sababu tuko na watu wajeuri na kiburi mingi pale kwa boda. Wewe Tanzania unaenda wapi? Wewe Mkenya unaenda wapi? Sijui. Watu bure sana. Wametuharibia biashara. Mr. Speaker, I don't want to run into the trouble of using unparliamentary language. Lakini hawa watu ambao wanaharibu biashara yetu pale, weka hii. Tumeambia mawaziri wetu wafanye kutano, tuondoe biashara, itusaidie kuunganisha watu wetu, kuhakikisha ya kwamba biashara inaendelea mbele, tuzalishe mali, tuzalishe ajira, tuondoe umaskini. Honorable members, implementation now is key. It requires a whole of government approach with Parliament at the center. Kenya has already moved, and a multi-agency technical team is in place to prepare the necessary legal and financial instruments. These decisions will unlock the full potential of the East African community as a pillar of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This is the agenda before us, and we must pursue it firmly, fully, and without hesitation. These are not minor administrative adjustments. They are structural reforms designed to ensure that East African community is not only aspirational, but functional and capable of delivering tangible outcomes for the East African people. Because without strong institutions, even the most ambitious integration agenda will struggle to succeed. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, the true test of integration lies in trade. The East African community must function as a dynamic economic bloc, one that expands opportunity, strengthens competitiveness, and delivers prosperity. Today, intra-East African trade remains below its potential, yet the opportunity is immense. Even modest increases would unlock billions in commerce, create jobs, and expand industries, empowering small businesses and retain more value within our economies. The latest quarterly statistic bulletin from the East African Community Secretariat underscores both our progress and our unfinished tasks. Total East African trade grew from $124.9 billion in 2024 to $157.6 billion in 2025, an increase of 25%. Within that, intra-East African trade rose by 28%, from $15.1 billion to $19.3 billion. Yet, despite this growth, it still accounts for a fraction of our total trade. Clear evidence that while momentum is building, the full potential of our regional markets remain largely untapped. That gives us a better footing in the region and as part of a broader continental framework, including COMESA and, most importantly and significantly, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. The ACFTA, as it's called, is a historic opportunity to create a single market of over 1.5 billion people with the potential to increase intra-African trade by more than 80%, lift millions out of poverty, and expand opportunity for millions of young Africans whose talent and ambition must find expression in constraint, but in growth. Not in constraint, but in growth, enterprise, and shared prosperity. The East African community must position itself as a strong pillar within this continental architecture, leveraging our integration to expand trade across Africa and beyond. We have seen this model succeed elsewhere. The European Union, for example, has demonstrated how regional integration can create scale, enhance competitiveness, and strengthen global influence. We can and must do the same in a way that reflects our realities, our priorities, and our aspirations as East Africans. Honorable members, a continent that remains divided by hesitation and mistrust cannot act with coherence and strength. It cannot coordinate effectively, and it cannot fully realize its potential. The reform of the African Union is not optional, it is an imperative. We must build an institution that is leaner, more focused, more effective, and decisively results-oriented. One that speaks with a single coherent voice on global issues, aligns its organs with priorities of its member states, and above all, translates decisions into tangible outcomes. This is, again, not merely an administrative exercise. It is a strategic necessity. A stronger African Union is an engine of a stronger Africa, and reform is the bridge between aspiration and achievement. Without it, the promise of Agenda 2063 risks remaining unfulfilled. Central to this renewal is financial independence. For far too long, a significant share of the Union's program has depended on external financing, undermining ownership, constraining strategic autonomy, and limiting our capacity to act with speed and certainty. Africa must fund its own priorities, set its own agenda, and engage the world from a position of confidence and self-determination. Unity and ownership are not abstract ideals. They are the foundations of our collective strength. At the same time, the call for reform must extend beyond our continent to every architecture of global governance. Reform is no longer a matter of preference. It is a matter of justice. A system that marginalizes Africa cannot claim legitimacy. Let me repeat that. I have said, and I want to say this with clarity, a system that marginalizes Africa cannot claim legitimacy. And a global order that excludes a continent of 1.5 billion people is inherently incomplete. Nowhere is this more evident than in the United Nations Security Council. A council that excludes Africa cannot effectively secure Africa. And without Africa, there can no longer be global security. Representation, therefore, is not symbolic. It is essential to building a stable and credible international system. Equally urgent is the reform of the international financial architecture. Today's system reflects a different era and does not adequately respond to Africa's realities. The cost of capital remains disproportionately high. Access to long-term financing is constrained, and the pathway to development is unnecessarily burdened. If the cost of capital remains punitive, then the promise of development becomes performative, that you have to do something to get it. Reform must restore fairness to finance, expanding access to affordable capital for infrastructure, industrialization, and climate resilience, while ensuring that global institutions evolve to support rather than to hinder Africa's ambition. This, honorable members, is not an African grievance. It is a global contradiction. A system that sidelines Africa ultimately undermines the stability and prosperity of the world itself. That is why we will carry this message to every forum, to every summit, and to every table until reform is no longer debated but delivered. Honorable members, unity remains our greatest leverage. When Africa speaks with one voice, reform ceases to be a request and becomes an inevitability. Continental instruments such as the Africa Continental Free Trade Area are already demonstrating what is possible when we act together. We must now match that ambition with institutions and financial systems that enable progress rather than obstruct it. From strengthening regional and continental institutions to reshaping global finance and governance, the path forward is clear. We cannot build prosperity in isolation. We cannot secure progress alone. We cannot shape the future while divided. We must build it together, deliberately, systematically, and with unwavering resolve. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, as I bring this address to a close, allow me to reflect briefly on leadership. Leadership is above all a privilege that comes with responsibility. Honorable members, it demands that we honor our word, fulfill our promises, and deliver on the trust that our people have placed on us. The trust test of leadership is not the offices we hold, but the outcomes we deliver and the courage we show in delivering them. In Kenya today, we are making deliberate progress in expanding healthcare, strengthening education, and delivering housing at scale as part of a broader commitment to dignity and shared prosperity. These efforts have required courage, the courage to make difficult decisions in pursuit of long-term national gain. Because leadership is not about following the crowd, but about leading with conviction, even when the path is not easy. It is this same spirit that we must now lead beyond our borders, because the choices we make as nations will determine the strength we build as a region and the influence we command as a continent. The investments we are making in infrastructure, energy, agriculture are not projects for one country alone. They are part of a broader vision of shared strength, one that connects our economies, aligns our interests, and advances our common future. And so, I extend a clear invitation to the private sector in the United Republic of Tanzania. Let us partner in this transformation. Let us invest together, build together, grow together, so that the prosperity we create is not divided but shared. Mr. Speaker, honorable members, in the end, the question before us is not whether we are neighbors. It is whether we will choose to act as partners. It is whether we will remain constrained by suspicion or rise together in shared strength. Because from neighbors to nations to the global stage, our future will be defined not by what separates us, but by what we choose to build together. Let me say one more thing. This morning, I had the privilege to speak to Masha. I think it's called Masha Mashomba. the good gentleman who is the managing trustee of NSSF Tanzania. And I've often referred to NSSF Tanzania in Kenya because you decided in 1997 that savings is a culture you must build. And today, your National Security Fund demands by law that you save 20%, both by employer and employee at your National Social Security Fund. We did just change the law in 2023 in Kenya to follow in the footsteps of what Tanzania have done. And today I was talking to Masha and he was telling me the progress of his building in Nairobi, Upper Hill, Nairobi. He's building a 22-story building, twin tower, $51 million from your own savings here in Tanzania. What a lesson for us as Kenyans, you know? And that he was telling me in 2 years, the building will be ready. That is how, honorable members, we must take charge of our own development and our own prosperity. We must learn to mobilize domestic resources. We must learn that we can build our resources by mobilizing domestic resources. And we know, economists tell us that investment is a function of savings. You cannot invest what you don't have. So we are learning lessons from one another. And I'm very proud that my sister Samia Suluhu and I, at this moment in the history of our two nations, we are working together closely to bring the people of East Africa together, to eliminate what has constrained us for many years, unnecessary suspicion. Our future is tied together. Our destiny is one. The success of Tanzania is dependent on the progress of Kenya, and the progress of Kenya is dependent on the success of Tanzania. We are one people. Once again, I thank Her Excellency Samia Suluhu Hassan for inviting me. I thank the Right Honorable Speaker and the distinguished members of this House for your honor for me to address this Parliament and for the friendship that makes this partnership not only possible, but enduring. Asanteni sana na Mungu awabariki.
Mheshimiwa Rais wa Kenya, lazima tukubali address yako kwenye August House hii, inspiring, monumental, and it will be remembered. Asante sana. Sasa Mheshimiwa Rais, sisi tuna utamaduni kwenye bunge kwa mgeni wa heshima kama wewe, lazima tupate mawili matatu kutoka baadhi ya watu. Dakika mbili. Kwanza namkaribisha